Hello, today I will be talking about the pros and cons of mandatory vaccination. So, first off, we need to know what a vaccine is. So, the CDC defines a vaccine as a product that stimulates a person's immune system to produce immunity to a specific disease, and that therefore protects them from all future contacts with that given disease. So, there are two primary types of vaccines. There are inactive vaccines and live attenuated vaccines. Now, this is very important for later on when I discuss how dangerous they are. So, the inactive vaccine is typically either a dead virus, parts of a virus, or proteins from the virus that, when put in the body, will initiate an immune response. Now, that one is the most commonly used, and it's relatively safe because it can't harm the body at all. Now, the live attenuated vaccine, that has some more risk because it's the real deal. It's the live virus. The only difference is it's cultivated in the tissue of another animal over many generations, so it eventually loses the ability to cause harm to humans. That animal might be like a frog, a bat, a sheep. It can be anything that has a different immune system than a human. And then eventually, it loses that ability to harm humans and spread between humans. But the risk is there's always a chance it can revert back to its original state, and it can cause harm or even death to the individual that receives the vaccine. And then once you have those two primary types of vaccines, they're mixed in with different compounds that help initiate the immune response, and they can be injected by a needle. And there are two additional ways not many people know about, and that is it can be administered through a nasal spray, or it can be ingested. So those are the vaccines. So what are the pros of mandatory vaccination? So with mandatory vaccination, you can eradicate some pretty nasty diseases. So eradication is the elimination of the disease from a population. It doesn't mean it's extinct. There's a difference. With eradication, it's still kept alive in a laboratory environment. So we've eradicated diseases such as smallpox, which during the 20th century alone killed 300 million people. It has a mortality rate of about 1 in 3. Another example of how we could benefit from a mandatory vaccination would be influenza. So millions of Americans are infected with influenza each year, and tens of thousands die. But yet we've had a vaccine for the past 90 years. So why is this happening? The problem is only about 37% of the adult population receives their flu shot each year, and that's not nearly enough. To keep it from spreading, we need to achieve herd immunity, which requires about 70 to 90% of the population to be immune. So if we could hit those numbers with mandatory vaccination, then it won't spread anymore, and you save millions of lives over the course of a decade. So you can benefit a lot. And then something such as measles, it was eliminated, which is elimination of a disease is based on geographical area. So it was eliminated in the United States. It didn't exist in the United States for a number of years because we had a strong vaccination program for it. But then people started to stop vaccinating their children, and then over time there weren't enough people to achieve herd immunity anymore. And within the past several years, we've had large outbreaks of the measles, and it's killed all kinds of people, mainly children, because those are the ones who aren't getting vaccinated by their parents, and it could all be prevented just by extensive vaccination. So finally, I will be talking about the cons of mandatory vaccination. So the first one I mentioned earlier in the video, and that's with the live attenuated vaccine. Seeing that it is the live virus, if it reverts back, according to the CDC, it can be lethal, and you can have severe symptoms. Another con is with anaphylaxis, which is a severe, possibly life-threatening allergic reaction. It can happen with any vaccine, some more than others, but it happens at a rate of approximately 1 per 100,000 to 1 in a million. Now, I know that's a really low chance and kind of insignificant, but when you think about the bigger picture, such as vaccinating entire countries, such as the US, with a population of 328 million people, you are guaranteed to put people in the hospital, and you're almost guaranteed to kill people with your vaccine. And another con is it can have long-term health effects, well, health side effects, but such as an increased risk of cancer or possible organ failure when you get older. We really don't know with some vaccines because it's not feasible to have a sample group and give them the vaccine and then wait 60 years to see what happens. And if you try to use something with mice with a lifespan of about 2 to 5 years, you still don't know how it's going to affect people directly. So we don't always know how it's going to hurt people. And if you vaccinate the entire country, you could be condemning a lot of them to an early grave, or for them to go through just terrible circumstances. And then another con is, depending on how you set up your mandatory vaccination legislation, it can be in direct violation of the Constitution, therefore unconstitutional, such as violating your freedom of religion by not allowing a religious exemption from the vaccine. So that concludes my final presentation on mandatory vaccination.